Now what we'll do here is that we'll just have the Spirit talk to you directly, and then maybe if we get a chance, we'll facilitate some questions. And we'll see how
maybe you can just...
And I'll have to keep an eye on the time.
Yeah, keep an eye on the time. But also... so this is a group of seventh sphere spirits who come along, who wanted to talk about their experience from moving from mind dominance.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how I'm going to do it because of the two of them. Just trying to ask John who should go first, that's all. And you need to keep that in mind, that there's a man and a woman who both want to speak.
Okay. Do you want to start, do a ladies first thing, shall we?
Yeah. So they understand their brief is coming to just talk about their life on earth and their journey in the spirit world so far.
Yep.
So that's what they want to talk to you about.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so my name's Annette.
Yep.
Yeah, and I was from this region. Hi. I was from this region when I lived on Earth, and...
Wave to everybody.
I know it's a bit weird with Mary with her eyes closed, but anyway, I don't know how to do the other thing yet. So.
Mary doesn't want to see you while she's doing it, though. So.
I can look above you, I suppose.
No, that's all right.
But then it's weird because, yeah. Okay. And I understand that you want to hear about my life. On
Earth first probably, and then how you became mind dominant in particular.
Yeah. So actually, myself and Charles is my soulmate who's here with me.
G'day. Yeah.
And so obviously we lived at the same time on Earth in the 15th century.
Yeah.
And so we've been in the spirit world some time now.
Yep. So nearly, 600 years? Is that close? Close.
We lived in the 1600s, so you can do the maths.
Yeah.
And actually, I had my experience when I was on Earth was that the time that we lived, there's a lot of judgment of women, and as a young woman, as a teenager, I fell in love, and the man was lost. He passed. It wasn't Charles, but I was in love with him, or I believed myself to be in love with him. And I became distraught and very emotional. I cried, and it opened me up in a way. Mm-hmm. And I was taken away from my family. I was put in a convent because they called me crazy.
Yeah.
And such was the judgment of emotion. Yeah. In everybody, but of course, as a woman, I was more connected to that initially.
Yeah.
Then I found myself very secluded from society, living with other women who were a part of an order, and I became very angry. I became very angry that I'd been punished in this way, but I lost I was really angry at my society, and I began to blame my emotion as well. And I sort of made a decision to enter my mind, if that makes sense. I wanted to gain education, and I became very learned in the books that were in the convent. And I actually ended my life believing that I had sort of conquered something that was a sin in myself, my feelings and my emotions. And I had become a learned woman, is what I wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And so I created a fracture in myself that I quite intentionally. And I suppose I feel that this part of my story is significant. It's not typical of the women of my time who more or less sort of existed under the rule of men, of course, and who managed to keep themselves in check. But it is a...
you mean keep themselves in check emotionally?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And but I suppose I see my life as a demonstration of some of the feelings that are still within women in this region now. This feeling that there's a danger. There's a danger of becoming crazy in having your emotions, and there's the danger of being separated from your loved ones for being emotional.
Yeah. Almost committed. You were sort of, in modern day terms, committed, weren't you? Really?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. But judged almost as a sort of evil, like a witch almost.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Needing religious correction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's why I was in the convent. Yeah. And sadly, I really, while I was angry at my circumstance, I didn't hold on to that emotional part of myself.
Yeah.
I really worked to suppress it and to gain dominance or ascendancy over my feelings.
Did you sort of see your feelings as the reason why you were in the problem in the first place, or?
I suppose so, and that was the message. It wasn't spoken of because people didn't talk about feelings. But I suppose I did. And then obviously when I passed, and I was quite an older woman when I passed, but I had never left the convent. And so it was quite a strange time after I passed, because I hadn't engaged in many active sins. But I carried a rage, a burning rage, a cold white rage inside of me.
Yeah.
And it took me years after I entered the spirit life to even connect to that sense of rage again. Yeah. Because I called it white rage because it was sort of a cold burn in me, if that makes sense. I had suppressed it to the point of hardness inside of myself.
Now, because you're in that state, where did you end up arriving in the spirit world? And what was your surroundings in the spirit world?
They were quite cold, I suppose you could say. Yeah. So knowing what I understand now, I was not in the depths of hell, but I was certainly not at the top of the first sphere, or even I was in the lower parts of the first sphere. But very much because I was in such a state of blame, I was pushing people away from me, and I was in quite a cold, isolated area, if that makes sense.
Because that's how you felt in your feelings.
Yes. I felt men in particular, but all people really were a threat to myself, and I had gained a kind of arrogance in myself about my mind, which is partly why I'm here today, because that was I saw my mind really as my saviour. I escaped to my mind away from what I believed was the thing that had caused me problems.
Gotcha. So in that state, did you still sort of intellectually investigate things, or were you quite even closed down at this stage to investigate anything?
Yeah, I didn't investigate when I first arrived here. I had I wasn't shocked that there was that life continued, because I had lived most of my life with an order of women who believed that life would continue. But because I felt so numb emotionally, I didn't have much aspiration for anything.
Right. So what softened you up then?
Time, in part. I lived a long time alone. And
could you estimate the time in terms of Earth years, as an example?
Maybe another 20 years. And then there came my own mother, who had passed a long time before me, but I didn't know when, or I hadn't seen her. She came to me, and initially I wouldn't see her, but she would just come and be near me. And eventually I spoke with her, and she was very regretful about that she hadn't done more to prevent my separation from the family.
Yeah. And is that why she came to you? She was sort of repentant for her sorrow about her part in it?
Yes. Yep. And she could see, I understand now, she could see that I was very alone, and she wanted me to have a better existence as a part of her repentance. She felt that. And I didn't want anything to do with my family, and I really didn't want anything to do with God, because I associated that with the convent and the isolation that I had experienced. Of course, I didn't think that the isolation that I was in was still a problem. I was, So, actually, it took some time of just speaking with my mother, and eventually she was able to share with me that she felt a connection to God. And eventually I became curious, I suppose, about what that meant, because she certainly didn't seem like the nuns, and there was a sort of a softness about her that I hadn't really remembered from my life on earth with her, and also I was very sure that I didn't have within me. So we began to talk about that, but it took me a lot of time in terms of being willing to trust that perhaps that there was that perhaps opening my heart again or feeling my heart again was not going to create more bad things for me, that it wasn't going to create more suffering or more separation for me.
So you were afraid that if you went down the emotional path again, that it was just going to create more trouble, and now you're in a new state and you didn't know what was going to happen with that trouble either.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I had made a conscious decision as just a girl to never sort of open that part of me again. Yeah.
So obviously eventually it opened.
I began to experiment, and of course some of the first feelings I had were sort of rage and feeling of restriction and a feeling of injustice, and eventually sort of feelings of grief, of loneliness. Yeah. All of those things I had almost entirely shut off within myself. And those initial times of beginning to even sort of touch those emotions were very scary for me. I felt certain something terrible would happen. Yeah. But I suppose because I was quite a diligent student within the convent, I realised that I needed to kind of just continue to stretch myself, I suppose. I would feel and I would anticipate dreadful outcomes and it wouldn't happen. And then the next time I would feel, I would think, I'm going to stretch it a bit more and see what happens. And I'm quite lighthearted about it now, but at the time it was quite fraught. I felt a lot of fear about the situation. Yeah.
It feels to me you had a lot of dread as well, did you, about what the future was going to hold if you went down that track? Yes.
And eventually I reached a place, and I would call it my surrender place, where I got to a place where I realised no matter what happened, I needed to. It was like chipping away at a wall that gradually I was letting little bits out, and then all of a sudden I thought, I must let this wall down. Yeah. I don't feel I can really hold it in anymore. I don't know what will happen. And until now, I really hadn't even involved God in this process. Mm-hmm. But I decided that it was sort of a crazy moment, if you like, where I decided not only would I let the wall down, but I would ask for God at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I just knew that that I had to do it. I suppose I had to have the feelings, even if it meant sort of the end for me. In a way, I thought it would be my death. But as I did that in this one instance, a lot of grief left me. It seemed like I cried for a long time. But as I was crying, I began to feel this loving presence. And it sounds crazy, but I didn't think that was God. Mm-hmm. I was still waiting for God to sort of be austere or somehow displeased with me. Even though my mother had told me it would be different, I couldn't escape that. I suppose that was something I needed to feel about as well. Mm. But
and obviously you'd been indoctrinated in the convent to believe that as well.
Yeah. And so I was crying, and I felt this loving presence. And at first I thought, oh,
who's that?
Yeah, my mother's come. Someone else is here, and no one was here that I could see. And I wouldn't even say in that experience that I really understood it was God, because I was still searching for a God that didn't meet this criteria. Yep. Yeah.
So how long was that from the time you passed?
By the time I had that experience, was 70 years after I had passed.
So you're sort of saying that it took you almost 50 years to chip away.
I had a deep level of a lack of trust. I felt I couldn't trust anyone. Everyone on earth had
disappointed you,
restricted me, I suppose, and beyond that point, of course, then things improved and sped up.
And so you now find yourself where you are.
Yes.
Which is seventh sphere.
In the seventh sphere.
Yeah.
So myself and Charles have been here for 10 years maybe now. Yeah. So it took us some time to get here. It hasn't been rapid. But
And was that because there were so many things to let go of in your mind, like let go of your beliefs and...
Certainly. Like I said, even in that first experience, I couldn't conceive, my mind couldn't conceive that God would have such a sort of gentle, loving presence. I didn't... It took me a long time to kind of... Then after that experience, obviously I felt a lot better and my surroundings improved immensely, immediately. But I still couldn't... My mind couldn't accept that was God. And
did you also feel a bit relieved and you wanted a bit of peace and calm at different times? Is that how you sort of felt?
Yes, certainly, certainly. So at certain points, so in the second sphere, in the fourth sphere, I've spent quite a lot of time just resting, just experiencing beauty, because in my earth life, it was very dry, it was very restricted. And so, after I began to sort of release emotion, I spent quite some time in the second and fourth sphere just sort of feeling myself again, I suppose. But my mind had to let go of this idea of so many things, but one of them was that I was somehow crazy now, or that I was somehow living in a delusion that things were better. It must be going to get worse.
Was that?
Yes.
So you sort of, even during those phases, you were sort of almost expecting that things might get worse in the future still.
Yes, I hadn't let go of that feeling. Yeah.
Which meant, of course, everything slows down.
Yes.
While you deal with that feeling, doesn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. But I mean, we feel very excited now because we feel that this, the freedom from the intellect is such. It's not completely gone, obviously, but it's such a. It feels as if, even though we're still contained in this spirit body, it feels as if we're so much more expansive in ourselves, and it's an odd thing to think that letting go of something makes you feel bigger, but it's true. You think letting go of something would make you smaller, but it makes you feel bigger.
So, what advice would you have for the group?
I think one of the most important things is to understand that you are coming from a culture that has judged women and emotion so strongly, so harshly, and almost to the point of personal danger. So when you find yourself on the edge of emotion, and it feels quite scary, it's to have compassion with yourself that you're coming from lines of women who have felt that they have been judged and diminished for allowing the strength and beauty of their own emotion. As women in particular, there is a sort of an inherent capacity for surrender that myself, when I was on earth, I was completely, I made the choice to shut that down. And I suppose part of my being here is acknowledging my part in creating and contributing to the future, even though I didn't have children, but the general feeling amongst women in this region that emotion is something that they should be ashamed of, or that they should hide, that they should control, that they should manage. So that's one thing, is to be compassionate and also to just allow those feelings, allow the fears of those things, because that's what I had to do. And you have the benefit of the knowledge now of what to do. And because of my life on earth and my early experience in the spirit life, if my mother herself had not had a connection to God after she passed, I don't know how much longer I would have spent in that situation. And all of you here now have this opportunity to understand what it is that can be done to alleviate the dread that you live in and the fear and sadness. And that's a great gift, but also to be patient and persistent and compassionate with yourselves in that process.
Do you mind answering a few questions from the audience? We might, because we still want to talk to your soulmate about his experience, because obviously it's going to be a bit different, isn't it?
Yes.
And so if we can maybe just see if anybody wants to ask any questions, and then we'll go to, it was Gerald, wasn't it? Charles, that's right, Charles. Yep. Yes, Hannah.
I would like to ask, how do you feel now? Can you tell me anything about your emotional experience now?
Sure. I mean, it's quite tricky, isn't it? Because I can feel in many of you that when we talk about emotion, immediately the feeling is for a negative emotion, like a sad emotion or a fearful emotion. And where I am now, I feel emotional all of the time, but it feels like a very free state. There are still some fears that I'm dealing with, but for the majority of the time I feel buoyant, I feel alive, I feel fresh, I feel energetic, I feel joy, I feel the love of God very constantly now, and I feel how that helps me to feel love for everything, and Charles and our friends here as well. So I feel emotional all of the time, but the pain and the hardship and the fears, the majority of them have left me now. And so it's the flip side, I suppose, of the emotional work that Jesus has been speaking to you about, is that my emotional work doesn't feel like work anymore. It just feels like full existence.
Elsa?
What's your home like, and what sphere are you in?
Yeah, so I'm in the 7th sphere, and our home here is very, it's very beautiful. It's very difficult to describe, and perhaps it's not the best time to go into a long description. But both Charles and I really love stone work and delicate structures, and so our home really reflects sort of this delicate carvings and certain things that we have in our home. That it's quite a warm home and quite a vibrant home, but we just have particular tastes that make it quite a sort of a pink and fine, and it's a very large house, and we spend time with our friends. And
when you say very large, in terms of what people here could relate to?
Well, larger than the complex that you're in now. Yeah. Lots of space for friends and experiences, and There's wonderful things about your home in the spirit world, and I encourage all of you to visit your home that you're building already now in the spirit world when you go to sleep, because what's fascinating and delightful about homes in the spirit world is that they reflect so much about yourself, the true state of your soul, and and there's many things that are designed in our homes that help us to experience ourselves or discover things about ourselves, and your homes in the spirit world are the same now too. Yeah.
Country or city?
In nature.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just one more question.
When you're saying that you gave up your mind, can you feel and describe your soul's mind? Is there any soul's mind you can describe?
So a couple of things. I wouldn't say that we've completely given up our mind at this stage. So, but this, there's a feeling of like, it's almost like when I compare my existence in the first sphere, my mind sort of had me in a cage and controlled me and constricted me. And now it feels very loose. It's something that I call upon to sometimes think about things, or even reason about the fears that we still have to work through. Or, but it feels very a loose part of me, if that makes sense. It's not very constricting in any way. And in terms of our soul's mind, I don't really feel what that is. I don't really feel that is. When I feel my mind, it's a very kind of mechanical, clinical kind of aspect of myself that in the first sphere, as I said, dominated me, and it ran me. The more that I have connected to emotion, to experience, to God, the mind still feels sort of mechanical and cold, but I don't feel connected to it anymore. So my feeling is that when we make this transition into the 8th sphere, I won't even feel anything that resembles a mind anymore, because I'll be living in this very expansive emotional state. Yeah.
I said that was going to have to be the last question, but should we want one more?
Yeah, sure.
Yep, so let's...
Thanks. Just wanted to ask if you could give any example of practical advice of how you let go of the mind.
Sure. Yeah, I understand that's that's the key thing that you're all wanting is, but how? Yes. I think perhaps even my example about I suppose in the beginning I didn't trust anything except my mind, and I didn't feel it as the restrictive kind of cage that I now understand it was. And so when I was talking about really experimenting with, I would allow my feelings for a little while, and then it was almost challenging the mind's idea that would be the end of me, or the worst thing that could happen. And so I suppose practically it's to begin to break down the reasoning of the mind through having experiences and then measuring what the mind said would happen against what really happened. So for myself, the mind said this is going to be disaster and more restriction and more isolation. But every time I would just even allow my feelings a little bit, I would have to sort of see, well, my mind wasn't right about that. And I suppose that's a practical thing that everyone can do, is to begin to experiment more with everything in your life with the intention to become more sensitive to what you feel. When I passed, I felt so cold and shut off from any feelings. It took time, and I didn't really know what I was to do, that I didn't understand what you kind of even conceptually understand now. But you can experiment with having experiences and attempting to be sensitive, or when an emotion comes up, to sort of experience that for as long as your mind will allow, because sometimes your mind is stopping that. But then it's to challenge the mind and to begin to break down the reasoning of the mind through those experiences. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
quite clear. Well, thank you very much for that. Thanks
problem.
for your time as well. Coming.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for hanging around all that time as
Yes.
well, waiting for us.
Yes, and I tried to keep it brief so that we
got time
Yes,
for your
yeah,
soulmate.
yeah,
That'll be good.
yeah.
I've just got to blow my snores and then
Okay, no problem. All right, well, say goodbye then. Bye-bye. Bye. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.